you need to have a conversion story. And the conversion story is the story that helps your customer make the decision to buy or not to buy.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. This is Sarah, your host. And as always, we want to welcome you back to the podcast because we are here to help you learn from other people about how to break through limiting labels and beliefs that might be holding you back from the things you actually want to achieve. And today, like always, we're diving into the stories of individuals who have redefined boundaries and pushed limits. Our guest today, we're going to look at the master of marketing and communications, Mr. Seth Donlin, and he has over 20 years of experience. But I will say that in our pre-recording conversation, he has a big heart and he has a passion for things. So Seth is the founder of Awen, a strategic communications agency that helps coaches, consultants, and business professionals captivate their target audiences through authentic storytelling. So we'll talk a little bit about what that is. Seth lives with his family on a vibrant farm in Sonoma, California. If you've been in that area of the country, you know it is vibrant. And he brings a unique blend of his own life experiences and professional expertise to our conversation today. So with that very brief introduction, let me formally welcome Seth Donlin to the podcast. Hi, Seth.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks a lot for having me on. I'm very flattered and I'm really excited to talk with you and talk with your audience.
Well, I want to start off by talking about the name of your company because I asked Seth to tell me how to pronounce it, and then he said it was Welsh, and I'm thinking, okay, there's a story behind that. So since you're a storyteller, what's the story behind the name of your company?
Sure. Well, the full name of my company is actually Awen A. And Awen is a Welsh word, and it means essentially inspiration. It's kind of like it's the Celtic equivalent of the Greek muses. So they didn't personify it in the way the Greeks did. It's more of a spirit, rather than, an anthropomorphized entity. But the ancient druids and the poets of Ireland and Wales and Scotland, they were said to be filled with Awen, and this was this, creative drive, inspirational drive inside of them. And then the AF part of my company name is the Celts also have a horoscope, they don't use sun signs or the annual calendar of the Chinese, for instance. They have a system where they use trees rather than an Aries, you're a type of tree. And I am an alder, which in Irish Gaelic is fairn. So the A is alder and the F is fairn. And so that's just a little nod to, a further nod to my kind of ethnic background, and a little egotistical, tag onto my company of my, my.
Why not? It's part of your story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So have you always been interested in storytelling?
Well, I won my first storytelling contest when I was 12, so I would say, sure. Yes, I was writing stories long before then. Just wasn't winning anything yet. But since then, like I said, I won my first contest at 12. I went on to study to the extent that I could. My high school had electives in creative writing. I studied creative writing in high school. I went on to college. My college didn't have a major in creative writing, but they had a concentration within the English major, and so I concentrated on creative writing in college. And in one way or another, I've been storytelling my whole career. And then, from after college, I became a journalist. And so, obviously that's a type of storytelling, particularly the type I was doing. I was doing kind of feature writing, longer form, less just just the facts. Went on to do press relations for elected officials and government agencies. Did a lot of, op-ed writing, wrote speeches for people. Obviously, I worked for a lot of large and small businesses over my career, helping them craft their stories, whether it's a marketing thing or a kind of a thought leadership project. Yeah, I've been fascinated with stories my whole life. I probably spend far too much time focused on them, whether it's me reading for pleasure or me studying how to get better at telling, writing and telling stories.
Well, that's a dedication that, says, like I would say when you talked about being an alder and then you have a tree, and I'm going, wow, that goes way deep in your roots to have that much connection to story and the willingness and the interest in actually pursuing it. But that's a lot of applications of story that you just talked about, like storytelling, journalism, speech writing. That's a variety. So I'm curious, when you look at that, which of those, if any, have informed how you kind of approach your work today the most?
I think the kind of speech writing, personal brand building is definitely what informs my current work the most. And even if I look back into the early years of my journalism, it was really what I was interested in. It's the personal stories that interest me. I have side projects where I'm writing creative stuff. I have an 11-year-old daughter. We're working on a comic book together. I mean, I do all kinds of stuff, right? That's purely fictional and in that nature. But I really like telling the stories of people, and even more so, I like helping other people tell their stories, because we all have fascinating stories to tell. Many of us, for whatever mindset reasons, don't see that about ourselves. But it's very rare that we meet somebody. I mean, think if you're traveling for business and you sit in the airport bar or something like that, you end up striking up a conversation with somebody. I mean, you don't hit it off with everybody, but more often than not, you end up having an interesting conversation with the person. You find some commonality, or you're like, oh, you ran track, I ran track too, or you grew up in this state, I grew up in the state too, and you start talking about it, and then you're like, well, how did you grew up in Utah. I grew up in Utah. How are you in New York? What's the story? And you start exchanging the stories around your life or around the project that you're working on that's exciting you right now, or whatever the case may be. We all have these stories, and we all tell stories every day. We tell stories to our coworkers when we get into the office from our commute or from our lunch break. We tell stories to our children, to our spouses, to our best friends, to our parents, whatever. They may be small stories. They may be a story about like, oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened in the parking lot at the grocery store today. This person was just being crazy or something, but it's a story, right? And so we all tell stories all the time. The trick is learning to, from a business standpoint, the trick is learning how to identify those stories that can help you convey the message that you want to your audience, right? Help them learn a lesson, help them understand something about your product or your service, help them understand something more about you and what your philosophy in business is, what your philosophy in life is. And most of the little stories that happen to you during the course of your day aren't applicable for that, but many of them are. And most people are not really aware of that, and they kind of just let that go by the wayside. And
well, thanks for teeing me up. That was my next question.
Okay,
it's like, what are those common challenges that your clients face? So when they want to start using storytelling in their marketing or just in communicating the impact of their work, what are some of their common challenges? And then, like, how does your approach help them think differently or overcome that?
Yeah, well, I think, I already discussed one of the biggest challenges is that many people that that come to me and I have a program called the Authentic Story Academy, and many of the people that enroll in that, first of all, they're not seeing themselves as storytellers. They've got this idea that, they've read books. They've read books by Jocko Willink talking about how he led all of the SEALs in Iraq, or I think it was Iraq, not Afghanistan. But, they have these somebody else has climbed up Everest and, almost lost their arm and had
stories.
They're these huge stories. Somebody else was in the Olympics, whatever. And we think, oh, okay, well, that's a story. That's the type of story that you need to tell in order to inspire people, in order to move people, in order to have an effective business story. I need this big thing. And, that couldn't be furthest from the truth. So getting people to realize that they have interesting stories, that's one of the first hurdles. The second hurdle is getting people to be comfortable being a little bit more vulnerable in speaking to, who they really authentically are, rather than who they think that their audience needs them to be, or who they think that they should be. I need to be professional, or I need to be successful, or I need to be whatever the case may be. I just wrote an article, not an article, but a post on LinkedIn where I talked. Now, I market myself not just as a storytelling coach, but also as a podcast guest coach. So if you want to be on podcasts as a guest, I can help coach you, right? And so obviously I want to appear very very professional in that regard. I want to be seen as very experienced, as very good at that. But I just wrote an article about how I didn't blow the interview, but for the sake of the story, it was kind of more dramatic to say that. But, I said I totally dropped the ball in this. And then I went on to explain how I did drop the ball and how I did something that I routinely talk to my audience about not doing. Right? There were extenuating circumstances, of course, but the point is it was a great opportunity for me to further make that point. And I'm fine with saying I'm human and I make some mistakes, particularly if the mistake that I've made can help my audience to not make that mistake down the road, right? And I think that's another big challenge that people get, is they have unwittingly crafted a persona in their mind that they think they need to project and be. And it's not a persona that they've strategically crafted. It's a persona that they've kind of subconsciously crafted for themselves. And the funny thing is one of the things that I work on with people in any of my programs is typically developing, depends, some people don't need it, but typically developing an alter ego for them to embody when they get on a podcast, step on a stage for a keynote, even if for some people, even if they're writing their newsletter or a post for LinkedIn or something like that, the idea that being authentic doesn't mean bringing whatever mindset or energy level you have right at that moment. Right? Nobody wants you to step out on stage and bring the energy that you've got because you just got bad news about a loved one or something, right? That you're not serving your audience by being authentic in that way and getting up on the stage and being like, okay, everybody, I just had this horrible news, so sorry, my speech to you is going to kind of suck, right? That's not being authentic. Now, at other times in your life, you are fired up, you're passionate, you're confident. That is equally you. So you bring that part of yourself to a stage, right? And rather than kind of just letting that happen, it's important that we craft, versions of ourselves, best versions of ourselves, alter egos, personas that we can use, that we can pull out of our toolkit and use at the appropriate time. but we do that intentionally and strategically. We don't let all of the baggage of our past life like inform the person that we're going to be when we step onto a stage or sit down to write something for our audience.
So you just did for me what I so appreciate is that there's the conflagration of authenticity and just spilling your guts, or like telling my truth in the moment, right? And it's okay. You've lost a family member, something bad's happened. It's not that that's not appropriate to discuss. It may not be appropriate to discuss with a group of people who are waiting for you to do something else because you promised you would show up and do that. But there's that balance of knowing, hey, I can have those feelings, but I can also call on my alter ego, who is me. It's just me differently, maybe the best parts of me. And I think you're the first person I've spoken with who've actually talked about using alter ego as a tool.
Yeah, for me, it's something that I work on a lot. I work on with my clients a lot. I think it's really helpful. Some people, again, I mean, you just talked about it. There's this idea behind that a lot of people get where, being different than you are in the trying to project a attitude or a feeling that's not feeling true to how you feel right at that moment is somehow inauthentic, right? And oddly enough, I was watching a gentleman give a webinar last night. I watch a lot of other coaches give webinars to see how well they do them and pick up little tricks and stuff like that. So I was watching this gentleman who's an incredible public speaker, and he's got a public speaking program, and so he's working on that. And one of the things that he said is, I work with my clients on playing with their voice, and I say, most people just talk like this, and they talk at the same level, and they're, it's kind of boring. And I say, look, you've got to play with your voice. You've got to talk with your voice way up here. And then you've got to talk with your voice way down here. And you've got to play with your vocal range because you've got this wonderful instrument and you can do lots of things. And he said, and then my my students say, but that's totally inauthentic. I don't talk like that. I don't talk way down here. That's fake. That's inauthentic. And he said, if your voice can make that sound, how is it inauthentic? Right? That's part of you. You have the physical ability to make those sounds. That's not an inauthentic thing to do. You've got to realize that something that feels different is not inauthentic. And I think that with the work in alter ego, people have that same feeling. They have that feeling that like, I'm doing something that feels different and I'm doing something that's intentional. And so intentional change is somehow fake because I just need to be who I am and who I've always been. But who is it that you've always been? You've changed so much over the course of your life, and many of those changes are completely unconscious, and they're just how you stumbled through life and ended up here. And then somehow that, like, unintentional changes in your life are authentic, but intentional changes that you set out to make are somehow inauthentic. It's a weird mindset that keeps us kind of small and keeps us from being as successful and keeps us from being the people that we probably would really like to be when
I just think about the name like Awen, right? Or Awen. That's when you talk about it, it's like the opposite, not the opposite, but the equivalent of the Greek inspire, right? To breathe life into and the spirit into. And I think it's inauthentic when we don't use all of ourselves. So when we know we have something, but we tamp it down, and this is true for me. This is not anything I'm not familiar with, but it's like, okay, you have more than that to offer in this moment, in this ability. Why are you playing small, right? You've been asked to step up, show up, right? But having an alter ego has gotten me to do things, and it hasn't been as intentional as you're talking about. I didn't say, okay, this part of Sarah's coming out, but it's like, you're going to go out there and you're going to embody this. Right? It's kind of a little bit of fake it till you make it with what you've got now, right?
Yeah.
If you finish doing that, you've got more because you did it.
Correct. And I think that there's also another aspect of alter ego that is another controversial, for many people, kind of controversial, and it's the idea that um, you can disconnect yourself from whatever it is that you're going to do that's scaring you or making you feel like, I don't know if I can do this, or I don't know if well, maybe not should do this, but some
So
part
we
of you
want
is
our
saying
conscious.
you shouldn't do that, right? So I say, I launched my first successful business in my very late 20s, and I was still struggling my way trying to get through undergraduate at that point in my life. And I actually dropped out of college for like the umpteenth time. I was almost failing out of college actually at that point when I was launching that business. I was almost failing out of my second college when I was launching that business. And I didn't want to fail out though. And so I finally went to a counselor, a mental health professional and slash counselor there at school. And I was like, look, I need help. I can get back on track. And so basically every week I would meet with her and she would tell me, okay, go to that professor, ask for an extension, go to that professor, ask for some extra credit work, do this and do that. And I would listen to her and say, okay, this is absurd. I'm going to go to that professor, and that professor's going to say, you're 28 years old, like, get your act together. You don't need an extension. Everybody else is getting it done. You're going to fail, right? I was convinced that they would literally like laugh in my face like some cartoon villain or something like that. Now, what would happen? I would go and say, it's fine. I'll ask them. And when they laugh in my face, they won't be laughing in my face because I know that they're going to say no. They're going to be laughing in her face because she's the dummy that told me to go ask for this extension. Then I would go and ask for the extension, and they would say, okay, sure, you can have an extension. Let's try to get you back on track. Because, of course, they're educators, and they want to educate me, and they want to get me back on track, right? And it took me quite a while to realize I was like, wow, okay, I can actually go and do these things. And, I probably don't need her to tell me anymore. I can probably just go and kind of do it on my own. But for a while, even though I was doing it on my own, in the back of my mind, I was like, let's just pretend that she told me to do it, right? She wasn't my alter ego, but I was using her in a way kind of like that, right? I was using her as my foil, as my whatever. She was going to take all the blame of any failure, and my ego would be perfectly fine because I wasn't the one who was being rejected and told no and so on, right? And alter egos can do that same thing for you, right? If you're terrified about going on stage and making a fool out of yourself, well, you build yourself an alter ego. Build yourself an alter ego that's the best parts of yourself so that you're not going to go on stage and make a fool of yourself. But you know what? If you go on stage and make a fool out of yourself, you're not the fool, your alter ego's the fool, right? And then you can recraft that alter ego or throw away that alter ego or whatever, right? But it gives you a bit of remove from the fear that you have. And that can be very freeing. You're like, okay, it's not my idea. The consequences aren't on me. I'm along for the ride. I'm going to go do this. And, many people don't need that, but some people do. They need that little psychological cushion to be able to get them to overcome their fears and do the thing that another part of them is saying, you need to do this. This is going to help you. This is where we need to go, right? So alter ego can do a lot of things for people. And, there's really famous people. I mean, Beyonce has Sasha Fierce. She's talked about repeatedly in interviews about how she goes on stage as her alter ego, Sasha Fierce, because early in her career, she had horrible stage fright. The baseball and football star, Bo Jackson, has talked about how he says Bo Jackson never played a down of professional football. Michael Myers, who he crafted after the horror baddie, and I think, what is it? It's Halloween or something, that Michael Myers, he's like the unstoppable, cold, ruthless killer. He's the one who played football. Every time I was on the field, it was actually Michael Myers who was on the field, right? So, and there are countless other professional athletes and entertainers and, you know, Olympians or whatever that have used this technique, and it can be really helpful if that's, you know, if those are things that you struggle with. Not everybody struggles with that, and not everybody needs an alter ego.
So I'm going to go back to your business a bit and think about the folks who come to either for the podcast guesting kind of support and coaching in that area, but maybe more for the storytelling about getting the essence of their organization out. And you talked about helping them find like the story, you know, at least realizing they have stories. Do you look for a particular type of story or a story arc? I mean, I mentioned that like the heroic thing, but do you like say, okay, let's try and get these 1 or 2 or 3 examples for your organization, or is it more fluid?
Well, I think that there's 4 main types of stories that a business needs to have in their story toolbox, or an individual, you know, solopreneur or whatever, you know, whoever we're talking about here. They need to have their origin story, and that's, everybody kind of gets that, right? And that's actually the one that gets overused. They're like, okay, I've got this great origin story and I'm going to use it, and it's going to make all of my potential clients be like, I got to work with you. You've got a great origin story. Fact of the matter is no, like, your origin story is not going to land you many, if any, clients. You need to have it because it's going to help you to land some clients, right? It's good. You want people to know who you are, where you've come from, why you do what you do, and that there's alignment between the two of you, and that you're going to work well doing business together, right? The next thing that you need to have is authority stories, and it's similar to the origin story, but it's just really more of like, okay, well, why am I the right person? It's not about my origin necessarily, but why am I the right person to be helping you? Well, I've won these awards, I've got these degrees, I've led this organization and that organization, right? This is a little bit tricky because nobody really wants to just hear a story about you bragging about all your, you know, wonderful things that you've done. So you have to be more subtle in how you kind of, you know, you need to humble brag a bit. You need to weave those things into like a frame, a story frame that's not about you, right? But that's something important as well. You have to be able to talk about why you are really the expert that they're looking for, right? That you're claiming to be. What's your proof? Okay. The third type of story that businesses or individuals need is they need client success stories, whatever that may be, right? I mean, as we were discussing earlier, my office is in an old converted barn that my wife still uses for her nursery and farm. I've carved out a little place. It's got a tin roof, and the tin roof is held on by metal screws, and the metal screws have little plastic washers, right? And like, whether or not the building stays dry depends on how well those little rubber washers hold up, right? So I bring this up because to myself, I'm like, well, screws and washers, like, that's not a very exciting topic or whatever. But for somebody that wants to have a dry roof, or who needs, you know, a new roof put on, and you can say, look, my washers hold up for 25 years, the competition's hold up for 20 years. I mean, that's a big deal, right? And if you can explain how that's going to save companies money over the long run and save on insurance claims or whatever, boom, that's a big deal, right? And that's a nice client success. So you could say, well, we put this roof on for this person and blah, 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 right? Just like I could have a success story about my client who I helped right after he was telling the wrong stories, not telling stories effectively. We worked together, and now he's increased his income by 2.5 times. And I have stories like that, right? So you want to have your client success stories. You want to have one origin story. You want to have one, authority story, and you want to have multiple. Hopefully, if you're just starting out, you won't, but you want to have multiple client success stories. But then the fourth one is the one that most people overlook, and it's probably the most important one. And you need to have a conversion story. And the conversion story is the story that helps your customer make the decision to buy or not to buy. Because ultimately, I can't serve my customers and I can't help people become better storytellers until they make the decision that they need to be better storytellers and that they are going to invest the time, money, and energy to become better storytellers, and that they've found somebody that they believe can really help them. And that's all mindset shifts, right? They have to shift their mindset into moving from inertia to making a change. And you need to have a story that helps them to see that they need to make that change, and not just see that they need to make it, but see that there's going to be real benefits from making that change. That's a conversion story. And that's super powerful. That's the thing that most people think their origin story is going to do. That's the thing that's going to actually get you your customers or your clients, is your conversion story.
So just as you gave me an example about the washer and the screw and the tin roof, can you give me an example of a conversion story?
Sure. So when I was a kid, now I'm dating myself here. I mean, people can see me, so they're not going to be shocked, but I was born in the early 70s. And so when I was in grade school, we're talking late 70s, early 80s, long haul truckers were all the rage. Hollywood was turning out tons of movies about truckers, right? If you think about like Smokey and the Bandit is a trucker movie, and Any Which Way But Loose is a trucker movie. And there were movies like Convoy, which was about all kinds of truckers. And my best friend Keith and I were obsessed with big rigs. And every chance we'd get, we would pack lunches, peanut butter and jelly, bologna and cheese, and whatever snacks we could get. We'd throw them in our backpacks. We'd jump on our bikes and we would pedal down to the nearest rural route that had some good amount of truck traffic. And we would sit out there, and as the trucks came by, we would argue about the important things in life, like which was better, Peterbilt or Mack. Keith loved Peterbilt. I loved Mack. It was a heated discussion that we would have. But as we were arguing this, what we were doing is we'd be pumping our fists at every truck that drove by to get them to blast their air horns. And, it's two like 10-year-old kids standing by the side of the road. Keith's in his John Deere, trucker cap and his puffy vest. And I've got this hugely oversized Vietnam era Army helmet on my head. You can barely see my eyes, right? And there we are pumping our fists. Of course, they're all blasting their horns for us. And we're just over the moon with all of these air horns blasting for us. If you think about it, on that rural route, I mean, this is a rural route. It's not like it's just truck traffic coming by. As a matter of fact, the majority of the traffic is cars and pickup trucks and vans and station wagons, the 70s station wagons, right? And station wagons never beep their horns for us. I mean, why would they? I mean, we're out there doing this. They know we're trying to get, air horns blasted for us. Now, were we bothered by the fact that the station wagons wouldn't beep their horns? Of course not. We don't care about station wagons. We care about trucks, right? Well, when we're out here telling our stories, telling our messages to our audience, quite often we start to worry about, well, how is this story going to be received overall? How is this story going to be received in general? And it keeps us from communicating as effectively as we can to our target audience, because we start trying to craft our message to appeal to a broader audience, because we don't want to turn anybody off. We don't want to get those comments. They're like, this is dumb. That doesn't make sense. Whereas your audience is saying like, oh, I get it. I totally get it. Right. And at a certain point, I thought to myself, wait a minute. I remember being a kid and pumping my fist and getting the air horns to blast and just ignoring everything else. And that's what we need to do when we're on a stage, when we're on a podcast, when we're writing a newsletter, a blog, whatever it is, when we're writing our book. We need to be laser focused on what we're looking for. We need to be pumping our fists, and we need to be getting air horn blasts. And all the station wagons, we just ignore them because station wagons don't have air horns. All right. Now, that's a story that I use as a conversion story because it helps people to understand that they're holding themselves back with their mindset of, I can't be bold enough to craft the story that I need, right? And for a lot of people, it kind of makes makes a little light bulb go off, flips a switch, and they say, "Oh, okay, I get it now." And it's a story that people can relate to. I mean, I saw you're like,
I'm a
nodding
little
your head and
but I
smiling.
remember doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
So much fun.
And so, that's a story. I mean, this goes back to me talking about the stories in the, the grocery store parking lot and stuff like that. I mean, this isn't from a grocery store parking lot, but this is a story about kids going out and playing and doing things that kids did. Maybe you didn't pump your fist at trucks, you did something else. But the point is that people will be able to relate to that. You were really into skateboarding. Lots of people are really into skateboarding. And even if they weren't, they had older brothers or sisters or friends or whatever that were really into skateboarding. You can tell that story and people are going to be like, okay, I get it. That's relatable. It's cute. And as long as the story fits, right? Like that truck analogy fits really well. I worked really hard on that, right? But it's a true story. And I practice this all the time. I tell my my students in the Authentic Story Academy, I make them keep a story journal where they write down story seeds, driving home from dropping off kids at school, saw 3 hot air balloons, wanted to take a picture, missed it, thought about circling back to take the picture. Boom, that's your story idea. You've written it down. So you make a list of all of these story ideas, at the grocery store, witnessed one customer help another customer or whatever, something that just made you're like, oh, that's really nice. And it's stuck in your mind. So you put it in your story journal. Now you make a list of all the things that you feel you need to talk to your audience about. The quality of your product, your hiring you know what I mean? We have diverse hiring practices, or whatever it is that you want to talk about. If you're a coach, you're talking about things like, hey, these are things that you need to learn. Here's skills that you need to sharpen, whatever the case may be, right? So now you've got these 2 lists and you number them. And then you go and get a random number generator. I use ChatGPT because it's easy. I say, ChatGPT, pick me a number, between 1 and 31 inclusive. And then it says 17. I'm like, great. And I take 17 and I pick my story seed, and the 17th one down. And I do that. I say, give me another random number, and I pick, this idea that I need to talk about. And I say, okay, so I need to talk about, using alter egos or something. Okay, now I have to take this story, the balloons, the 3 balloons in the sky, and how does this relate to alter ego? Well, usually it doesn't much. But the skill is kind of forcing it together. And it's a great exercise because oftentimes as we struggle to make it fit together, suddenly, it's like the world turns upside down and you realize, oh, wait a minute, these actually do fit together. And then you don't necessarily come up with the best story. It's not always a keeper and you're going to use it, but suddenly you're like, wow, those actually kind of work pretty well together. Other times they don't work well together at all. And in forcing them together, you have to be so absurd that it's actually funny and entertaining, and it's just a kind of a fun exercise. But I have my students do this all the time. I do it all the time. As a matter of fact, every Friday, today, I just launched my first episode of what I call Mashup Madness. And right now I'm doing it myself, or I'm having random number generators do it myself. But I'm hoping that people are going to chime in and start participating by giving me challenges, giving me prompts. But I'm picking a story for my story seeds. I'm picking a profession, not my own profession, a different profession, but that would be within people that I talk to, coaches, consultants, other subject matter experts, and then a topic that they would want to talk about. And then I have to write a useful story using my story seed and their professional topic. And so today it was a freelancing trip that I took to South Africa in 2000. And I got to go out with a great white research team and go cage diving with great white sharks. And the profession was executive leadership coach. And the idea, the lesson was developing building up new leaders internally within your organization, training up new leaders within your organization. And so I'm like, oh, shark diving in a cage and building up new leaders, how's this going to work? So, I thought about it for a little while. I did some research. I thought about it. And I'm like, okay, well, what is thought leadership? What do they say you need to do? And as I'm researching, bing, they say, give them safe spaces to practice practice becoming leaders, right? You need to design safe spaces for your candidates that you're trying to build up into leaders. And I was like, safe spaces, shark cages, this is great. And so then I crafted a story about explaining how this research team was training their junior members and, being in the cage and all these different things. And, was it great? And, I don't think any executive leadership coach is going to come and pay me for that story so they can start using it. It wasn't perfect, but it's pretty good. And so I'll be doing this every Friday on LinkedIn. But I do this all the time for myself within my, right? I'm not picking other professions. I'm picking my profession. And I just practice putting stories together like that all the time, because you never know when a story is going to be the next one that's like really good for you to convey some point, or may end up being a good conversion story for you.
What a great exercise. But something you said that I thought is the takeaway is you have to practice.
Oh yeah, it's like,
you can't just
baseball,
think about doing it.
No, it's baseball players in a batting cage, right? I mean, and you think about it. I mean, I'm a big baseball fan, so apologies to the people that don't follow baseball closely. You'll still get the point. Whenever you read about the greatest hitters in the game, right? I mean, they're great hitters. They were great hitters in high school. They were great hitters in the minor leagues. They're great hitters now in the major leagues. The major leagues have batting coaches that they're working with, and then they pay other batting coaches on top of the batting coaches that the team is providing them they're just working on their batting all the time, because they realize that's their profession. That's what they're making millions of dollars to do. Why wouldn't they, right? They practice. And they may be renowned as one of the top, like, 5 or 6 batters in all of Major League Baseball. But they're not saying, I'm great, so, I've got it covered. They're still out there hiring people to try to make them better, right? And so, look, I am a professional storyteller and teach people to tell stories. And so, of course, I'm going to be eating, sleeping, breathing story. You are a lawyer, or you're a life coach, or you're whatever. You need to be eating, sleeping, and breathing that. But part of being successful in your profession is probably, I am going to argue, is getting better at storytelling. And so you need to, when you make that decision, that you want to get better at storytelling, you have to realize that just like anything, you're going to carve out some time in your week. It doesn't have to be hours and hours and hours, but you're going to carve out some time in your week to get in the batting cage and get your reps in and get better at, right? You're going to write story. You're going to do some exercises. You're going to think about stories during the day. I mean, we're driving in cars, there's all kinds of time in our day where we've got time that we could be working on something. You're going to carry your notebook around with you, or, jot down in your phone your story ideas, right? And it doesn't take, you can take all day working on story, right? You don't have to, but you need to spend some time doing it if you want to get better at it.
So you have an offer of a 45-minute session leadership wellness boost. Is that correct? Is that familiar?
That is not quite correct. I have an offer of a story audit.
Okay.
All right. And you can send me either a link to a podcast that you've done, or you can send me a written, like if you have a blog or something where you've written out a story that you're doing, you can send it to me and I will give you an audit of that presentation, that performance, and let you know the things that are working in it, the things that aren't working in it. And yeah,
What's the best way for people to do that? Where will you prefer them communicate with you?
Sure. They can just go to my website, SethDonlin.com, SethDonlin.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes.
It will.
And right there on the homepage, you will see a button to sign up for one of those audits.
That is a great offer. And for anybody who thinks they're too shy to do that, grab your alter ego. Just say, hey, No Labels, No Limits told me to send this to you. I'll be your alter ego. Because that's a powerful offer from Seth to just get an audit, because you might be surprised at how much you're doing is working and you might want to double down on it, or you might find out there's something you could just stop doing and have better results. So Seth, I think, first of all, I applaud your work because it does make a difference. People who can tell stories. I mean, I was so enthralled with you and your buddy down there trying to get the horns to honk, or the air horns to honk. But it really is a great demonstration of how stories connect us. And of course, I'm not going to forget that story because you made me feel something, which is the point of story, right? To say
Absolutely.
and live on. So with that, let me knock everything over here. With that, I want to thank you for being a guest on the podcast. I'm going to leave you with the outtake. A couple of words of wisdom that you want our folks to remember as we wrap up today.
I would say, look, we all have important voices for the world to hear. And unfortunately, most of us also have voices in our head telling us that that's absolutely not true. But listen, just like I was relying on the wonderful woman that helped me in college and told me to go talk to the professor and stuff like that, if you need to, use me, and I'm not saying hire me, I'm just saying right now, use me. I'm telling you, don't listen to that voice in your head. Listen to me. You have an important story to tell the world. Maybe it's important to one person. Probably it's important to many more than one person. But even if it's only important to one person, you have the story that's going to make all the difference in that person's life. You can say something just slightly differently than the next person that's going to make them say, oh, I get it. That's what I needed to hear that, right? And so don't hold that back. Don't deny that person or those people your story. Don't let that voice in the back of your head keep you from serving people, keep you from helping people, keep you from living as big as you can possibly live.
Well, thank you, Seth. And No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners, we'll be back next week. I do have a request of you. If you are so inclined, please go to Seth's website and submit something for him. Beyond that, if you found value from this episode and who couldn't find value from Seth's words, share it with somebody. You know, there's somebody, just like he's saying, there's somebody who needs to hear something, and it may just be you sharing this episode with them. Of course, we would love for you to rate and review this so we can reach many more people and maybe help them turn things around. Yeah?
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.